Revving up and ready to go with the 2D podcast. Much to get to. Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, Soren Petro with you. We talk about free agency as it is off and running. Derek Carr signs with the Saints. Did he make the right choice? Aaron Rodgers to the Jets. Can we just be done with this damn thing already, please? Just make that deal happen so we can stop talking about it. I'd love to not have to type Aaron Rodgers' name once on the rundown. Lamar Jackson's future in Baltimore. What's it look like now that he's getting the non-exclusive air quotes I'm using? Can see it on the stream. You can't hear it, though. Air quotes on the non-exclusive franchise tag that Baltimore put on Lamar Jackson. Daniel Jones didn't get $45 million per year, but he got $40 million per year. Why? Geno Smith gets $35 million per year to stay in Seattle. Turns out Bryce Young's not just light, but he's short also. We'll talk about what that means for his draft status and Jalen Carter being involved in an auto accident that cost two people their lives. What is that going to end up meaning for him when it comes in the NFL draft? We talk about it next here on the 2 Deep NFL podcast.
You're listening to the 2 Deep Podcast, the most complete analysis of the National Football League, breaking down the NFL like no one else can. 2 Deep is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Eric Eager is the vice president of research and development for Sumer Sports. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. 2 Deep is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Gann Asphalt and Concrete is now hiring for all positions: project manager, dump truck drivers, operators, and crew members. Starting pay up to $30 per hour based on experience, with paid time off and insurance, just to name a few of the benefits. Check out GannAsphalt.com for more info. Now, here are the hosts of the 2 Deep Football Podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, and Soren Petro.
Yes, indeed. Time to talk some NFL football with Jeff Chadiha, Eric Eager, Soren Petro with you. Thanks for joining us here. If you're catching us via the podcast later in the week, remember we stream live during the offseason. It should be Tuesday nights. Of course, sometimes schedules happen, and so we have to adjust. Make sure you're following us on the social media platforms, and we'll let you know when we're going to be. But coming to you tonight on a Tuesday night as NFL free agency really got going, Jeff. Let's start with the fact that Derek Carr, Raiders tried to trade him to the Saints. There was obviously an interest there. Didn't land there. He talked to New York, but ultimately he does go to New Orleans. Right move for Derek Carr, right move for the New Orleans Saints. What do you think?
I've said all along, I thought Derek Carr's best option was to be in New York with the Jets. What I don't know is if the Jets really made him a serious offer, or an offer that was attractive enough for him to make a move there, or whether he wanted to be in New York City, a place that is way bigger than Oakland or Las Vegas or New Orleans. And look, he gets to be reunited with Dennis Allen, who was the coach when he came into the NFL. There are some good skilled players in New Orleans to work with, like Chris Olave and Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, all that group. But I just can't imagine that, this is even though it's the NFC South and that division stinks, he'll have a chance to be in the playoffs. I just don't see where it's going to be that great of a situation for him. I'm a little bit disappointed because I felt like the Jets would give up nothing to have him there, and he could be a good enough quarterback to help them succeed. But ultimately, he chose New Orleans and got a nice payday out of it, or at least a decent payday out of it. He's with his old coach. They'll be a 9-8 team. I think that's what they'll be, and it'll be much ado about nothing.
Yeah. Derek Carr to the Saints. They're still woefully over the cap and, managing cap issues and everything. He stays away from a big media market. New Orleans is about as, after Green Bay, the smallest market, I believe, in the NFL. Is this at least a good fit from that standpoint?
I mean, in the sense that neither one of these entities wants to do anything great, and that includes Carr. Fine. Yeah. Okay. Like the Saints don't really they don't want to do the right thing. They don't want to actually win in a sustainable way. They want to continue to bring in guys like Tyrann Mathieu and hey, let's go, let's bring in Andy Dalton and now it's Derek Carr and all these things. They're optimizing for being 9-8 for the next 3-4 years, as Jeff said. Derek Carr, runs away from the AFC West because it's too hard, frankly, to win. And the AFC in general, because it's too hard to win, goes to the worst division in football, the worst division in the worst conference. And yeah, I mean, he basically had the same production last year, actually worse production than the Saints quarterbacks did. So this move is kind of just like a Eeyore type thing for me. Hopefully, the Panthers will do the right thing and draft one of the 3 top guys in that division. And Frank Reich, who I think is a great dude, can go and actually win that division and kind of show the league once and for all that guys like Derek Carr aren't winning solutions, even when your division sucks.
Yeah. I kind of like Matt had kind of an angle. Great for Carr, horrible for the Saints. What do you think, Jeff? How's this? You agree with that assessment that can be good for one side but not the other?
I think it's an equal marriage. He'll be the best quarterback they've had since Drew Brees left. I mean, let's not forget Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston were playing quarterback for them with some Taysom Hill thrown in there for effect. But again, it's their salary cap is so screwed. Somebody just mentioned it. The salary cap situation is so screwed up there that you cannot put a decent team on the field when you're dealing with what they have to do. They're talking about $50 million over the cap. They
can't cut. If they were to cut every player that they cannot play next year by cutting players because there's so much dead future money that's owed to guys on the roster that if they cut everybody, they would be over the cap.
Yes.
These charges would come up. So they have to kick the can down the road just to survive.
I never mind a team trying to get better at quarterback, and I do think Derek Carr is better than anything they've got that they've had out there. I don't mind, if Jameis Winston comes for 25 cents on the dollar and he's healthy. I don't mind that. I think that's a fine plan, but I never mind a team getting better at quarterback. But to the point about the cap, what's so amazing about the Saints is they've been in the spot for 3 years now, and they never just suck it up and go, we've got to make the massive cuts that really hurt and are going to make us a bad team again. And they keep buying. I don't know. They Peter King picked them for the Super Bowl last year, right? When we went back and we were looking at our prediction show, we were talking about how Peter King was picking them for the Super Bowl. I think we all had them in the playoffs, though, didn't we? Went through it. They keep selling that crap, and in reality, it doesn't even matter if they get there, though. All they are is commercial film. And so they keep selling themselves and other people, or other people keep selling them on the idea that they can actually contend, and they're not. And it's amazing. They just keep kind of moving it back, and they still have never taken the full brunt of what they need to do to try to get free of this. And what they're doing while all this is going on is watching Alvin Kamara get older and graduate out of his best days. All their good players are just growing old on a team that can't win. It's really kind of sad how they're going about doing things, I think. But
yeah, and it's been that way. Even when Sean Payton was there, to a certain extent, they were not great managing the cap. Obviously, this is his monster he created right before he bolted to TV and then bounced back into the NFL with the Broncos. But that mindset is just they need to do what the Falcons did. To be honest with you, a couple of years ago. Okay, Julio Jones, time to go. Matt Ryan, time to go. You got to start making those tough moves and resetting yourself and giving your chance. So, like for a guy like Derek Carr to want to be a part of that, I mean, you could have chosen any place you could go. I just felt like he could have made a better choice. I think if you wanted to win a championship, if you wanted to be safe and be comfortable, he got the right spot.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point from Temecula. I mean, Mickey Loomis doesn't have that many more years. Probably at the helm, but who knows? Some guys in the there are a lifers in the league that stay forever on where they want to go. I mentioned the Aaron Rodgers. I wish he would just get to wherever he's going to go and then go on a darkness retreat for about 5 months. I don't think it's going to happen. Eric, Aaron Rodgers to the Jets. I mean, it seems like Derek Carr is gone. They're not going to steal the crosstown guy as much as the Giants should want them to. This is pretty much the last best option for them, right? They have to try to get this done because they don't really have another choice, do they?
Yeah, I mean, other than shooting the moon on Zach Wilson, like I just don't think that there's really going to be much more there. Like and I'm with you, man. I had so somebody said, Aaron Rodgers is talking to the Jets, and my first thought immediately, well, at least he's not talking to himself anymore. I feel like this guy, we've lost him. I think that's your statement. We've lost him.
I will give credit to Mick Schaefer from the NFC affiliate here in Kansas City, who has dubbed that term of when a guy's just like no longer, he's just so mired in himself and what's going on that they no longer have touch with reality. It's one of the great terms ever. Yes, we lost Aaron Rodgers about 3 years ago, I think.
Yeah, and so I mean, he goes to the Jets. Like, look, and there's another part of me, like Aaron Rodgers. I think we feared him, right? Like when Aaron Rodgers, that throw he made in 2019 in Arrowhead to the back corner of the end zone to Jamal Williams was one of the best throws you'll ever see a quarterback make. I mean, he's one of the most talented players to ever lace him up. Like, there's all of that being said, and he did have statistics last year in Green Bay that were similar to what Tom Brady had his final year in New England. So anything's possible. I just look at the Jets coaching staff, Nathaniel Hackett being the offensive coordinator. I'm not seeing confidence there with him and his play calling. He never called the plays when the two were together in Green Bay. I don't see it being successful, but it's probably the only chance the Jets have, other than trying to play it out another year and see if they can get some high variance out of a young guy / Jimmy Garoppolo / Zach Wilson type thing.
Will it be any better with the New York Jets, Jeff, with Aaron Rodgers than it was for Brett Favre? I mean, because while it worked to the tune of getting to an NFC Championship game with the Vikings, would this be more of Favre with the Vikings or more of Favre with the Jets?
I think it might be more Favre with the Jets, and I was around the Jets when that happened, and Green Bay when Aaron and Favre, were going through their drama there, and Aaron got the job and Favre left. And what's always stuck out with me about that is when Favre got to the Jets, he just kind of ran. He did what he wanted to do, and there was never any real guardrails on him. Eric Mangini was the coach, and they just sort of, and people forget maybe he was sending dick pics to people working in the building. Remember that? Jen Sturger.
By the way, Jen Sturger is a really funny stand-up comic now. Jen Sturger's hilarious.
I was going to say Richard.
By the way, every stand-up comic has some sort of traumatic experience in their life. Some people, daddy issues, all this stuff.
Allegedly.
Jen Sturger allegedly had Brett Favre send pictures of his manhood to her. That's how she got to be as sharp as she is, I guess.
Yeah. So we expect lewd photos.
I guess the large point I was going to make, this could look a lot like, not to the extent of Aaron Rodgers playing like Russell Wilson, but Nathaniel Hackett's downfall in Denver was placating Russell Wilson and really not bringing him into check. And as much as Aaron Rodgers has kind of complained about the first year with Matt LaFleur came in with a plan and really made Aaron Rodgers execute that. And they found a happy marriage there, a happy medium. Eric mentioned it. Nathaniel Hackett did not call the plays in Green Bay. He did not show any kind of organization or imagination or any real kind of motivation for Russell Wilson in Denver. So that's the dangerous part for me. Is somebody going to sit Aaron Rodgers down and say, we need you to go get these receivers together in the offseason. We need you to be a positive influence. We need you to not be on the Pat McAfee show every week while you're here. Who's going to do that there? So I think if you start playing this game with Aaron Rodgers, it would not surprise me if they spent 3 months chasing after him and he said, you know what? I'd rather stay in Green Bay. good luck with Zach Wilson, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
It's a very dangerous game to play with him until he's completely on board with it.
Yeah, and it's one that the Packers, I think, desperately want the Jets to get right because I think they want to be done with him, which is amazing. I do love this. Does anybody know, does the Cal volleyball team need any kind of new facility? Do we know?
I mean, the one thing that's different about Rodgers relative to Favre is that Rodgers doesn't have any offspring that he can grift for. So I think that at least we have, allegedly, I don't want to get sued. Because I know McAfee's going through it right now with Favre, and as is Shannon Sharp. But it's going to be hard to reel him in, right? Like, is Robert Saleh in a position to like go up to Aaron Rodgers and be like, "Hey, man, like enough's enough"? Like, has he earned that in the NFL? I'm guessing no. I'm guessing Rodgers is just going to walk all over the guy, which to me, I don't think that. Is Aaron Rodgers a Robert Saleh type of quarterback? I mean, that's a good question to talk about with respect to the Jets. Maybe that's what they're trying to figure out. Robert Saleh, to me, feels like a guy that doesn't put up a lot of crap. So, would that be? Are those two things compatible? Does he end up going to Vegas because where could he go? Where they're like, hey, yeah, we'd love to take you on here, because as Jeff said, we saw it in New York. They kept that under wraps, but then it became very public when Russell Wilson went to Denver and had similar issues.
I'm trying to remember. Ahmad Rashad was said to, always be kept around NBC because he was Michael Jordan's buddy, right? Brian Windhorst has moved from Cleveland to Miami to Cleveland to LA because, LeBron confides in him as an NBA. He's a fine reporter. I'm not trying to take anything away from anybody's jobs, but these things. Have you ever heard of a coach that keeps getting hired to try to get a guy the way Nathaniel Hackett has got a head coaching job? I mean, isn't this like kind of unprecedented territory?
Yeah.
I'm mesmerized by Nathaniel Hackett's path through the NFL based upon the path. Remember the joke, like when every guy that had ever been around Sean McVay was getting hired, like, oh, he once got Sean McVay a cup of coffee. He's now the head coach in Dallas. Like, Nathaniel Hackett is amazing and how he's got things going there. By the way, our 2D podcast proudly brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. They're hiring right now, by the way, up to $30 per hour based on experience with paid time off and insurance, just among some of the benefits. You can check them out at GannAsphalt.com. All positions they're hiring for. Kansas City's best when it comes to handling any and all paving problems. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. Let's talk about Lamar Jackson's future in Baltimore. First of all, am I the only one that was stunned? And I don't do this to pick on anybody, but Dan Orlovsky bombed the Ravens for using the non-exclusive tag. Herm Edwards. I don't know Dan Orlovsky. I've talked to him a couple of times. I know Herm pretty good. I'm a huge fan of Herm Edwards. What is I don't understand why so many people feel a need to come to the aid of Lamar Jackson. The non-exclusive tag, this is the best usage of the non-exclusive tag that I've ever seen in my life. It's perfect. It's exactly when you should use it. The Baltimore Ravens will get 2 first-round picks if anybody puts a contract in front of Lamar Jackson that he'll sign and they choose not to match. So if somebody were to put $12 million a year in front of him, we know he wants way more than, but he signed, all the Ravens got to do is go, we'll match it. Somebody puts $75 million per year in front of Lamar Jackson, guaranteeing it all for 10 years. The Ravens just go no, and they get 2 first-round picks. That, to me, is exactly how this tag is supposed to work. First of all, nobody's going to give 2 first-round picks, I don't think, for Lamar Jackson and give Lamar Jackson the amount of money he wants and the guarantees that he wants. Or am I reading this wrong, Jeff?
Well, the one team out there that was the prime candidate, the Atlanta Falcons, there are reports that they won't do that now, which, things can change, but they have the salary cap space. They pursued Deshaun Watson. They need a quarterback. It makes a lot of sense. Their coach runs a run-heavy offense. So I'm not so certain that possibility is not going to exist down the road at some point. But I do agree with you. I think the Ravens are playing. It's a dangerous game they're playing here too, because somebody can swoop in there, create a deal that they can't match and he can walk out the door, the 2 picks are great. But I feel like their belief is nobody's going to guarantee you $230 million or more. No one's going to guarantee you $200 million. And we can tell you this until you're blue in the face. You need to go out there and see it for yourself. And so their hope is that whatever he gets offered, he's never going to accept it because everything they've offered him so far has not been acceptable. Now, I'm of the belief that Lamar Jackson needs to understand 2 things. One, you can't play for any team in the NFL. The way you play football is a very distinctive, very unique skill set you're bringing to the table. And some teams are not built to handle that. And so your market already is going to be much smaller than you probably think for that kind of money. And 2, 4 years ago, you were a unicorn. There was nobody else like you in football. Now you have Jalen Hurts. Now you have Justin Fields. Now you have Kyler Murray. Now you have Anthony Richardson coming from Florida. A lot of fast guys who can throw the football and can run around and do dynamic stuff. And that makes you a lot less interesting to teams that you think will pay big money for you. So I think he's got to be more realistic about where he's at market-wise. The Ravens have options if he's not playing football for them. I think he's got to recognize that as part of this negotiation.
Eric, how do you view the way the tag has been used by the Ravens?
It's fine. I mean, there's a lot of risk. It's risk that I think the Ravens are willing to take on. There's also, I think Jeff has said it, well, it's like Lamar represents a unicorn in both directions, right? He's a guy that we've never seen before, but has injury risk. The reason I think the media is down is that 2 first-round picks sounds like a lot, and I think you get it for obviously, but it's like Deshaun Watson went for 3 first-round picks, a 3rd-round pick, a 4th-round pick, and I can't remember, and a fully guaranteed deal, right? And I think Lamar is a better player than Deshaun Watson. So and was coming off of sexual assault allegations and stuff like that. Like, I think there is this idea that Lamar is constantly undervalued. And I think a more rational approach, and I'm a big Lamar fan. I think Lamar is in that group with the top guys. But I think that there's an opinion around the league that I think the Ravens somewhat share, which is that there's enough uncertainty around his play style that you should at least open this up. I also think that the other issue is, shift the bad guy blame. Like, everybody looks at the Ravens and says, this is a team, Eric DeCosta, every dollar counts, right? That you look at Ravens Twitter, and when you're Lamar and you're like, oh, are they going to skimp on me the same way they skimped on Matthew Judon and Yannick Ngakoue and CJ Mosley and guys that they've let go? Show that the rest of the league is willing to skimp on you too, and maybe you get a little bit goodwill back towards your team, the Ravens.
Yeah, I think this is one that I don't think he's going to get the offer, and the question is the damage there between between the team and the player? Can these fences be mended, or does proving that we're right, no one's going to give you that much money, just piss him off that much more to where he says, I don't want to be here, whatever it takes, get me out of here. I want to go. I think that's worth watching. I love the point you made, Jeff, about the fact that you play a specific style of football. Like you're not just available even to go anywhere, right? You don't just plug and play the same way some teams are just the Chargers aren't going to just plug in and go. So I still think the Raiders are kind of an intriguing spot because Josh McDaniels went after Tim Tebow. He was there for Cam Newton. I still think that's kind of an interesting spot as to whether or not they pop up on the radar screen from it. Daniel Jones wanted $45 million per year, Jeff. I thought that was comedic. He didn't get it. I still am giggling at what he did get. What are the Giants thinking? I know $82 million, the guarantees are what's there, but it's not just that it's 4 for $160, $82 million guaranteed. There's $35 million in incentives there. Like, what are the incentives? 17 touchdowns in a season, 18, 19, my God, 20 whole touchdowns. I mean, a Patrick Mahomes homestand is what he had last time. 15 touchdowns all year, and he gets $40 million per year. Can you make sense of this one for me?
Yeah, I chuckle when people were decrying Alex Smith getting paid $18, $20 million a year when he was here. It's a long way for a game manager to go to get that kind of coin. And they've overpaid for an average quarterback. And I applaud Daniel Jones for what he did this year with Brian Daboll. I understand what he can mean to them moving forward with, having a quarterback in place that knows the system and can move around. But my God, man, it's like when you're paying people like that kind of money, Geno Smith, to me, we'll talk about him as well,
right,
represents the prudent move to make as a quarterback. When you're Daniel Jones, you're taking that kind of money, your sense of perspective on what you need around you to succeed is seriously warped. I mean, it really does put you in a position now. Yeah, they'll work out something with Saquon Barkley now. They franchised him. But when your quarterback needs that much help and you're making that price tag on him that high, I just think the Giants, for all the good things they did this year, they just took 3 steps back.
Yeah, the Joe Shane being a part of the Bills when they tried to tank. Remember, they traded Sammy Watkins, Ronald Darby in the middle of the preseason. They mess around and win enough games to make the playoffs anyway, but then they're smart enough to move on from Tyrod Taylor and go with Josh Allen and like kind of build. Like, were you not there? Like, did you not see this?
Mm-hmm.
You bring up Alex Smith. I think like we've made that comparison. That is who Daniel Jones is, right? Like that is, start out slow, have some injuries early on. And I like, Daniel Jones has Alex Smith's limitations too. He's a very black and white quarterback in that, like, when he decides to run, he's running and he's effective. When he decides to throw, he's throwing and he's somewhat effective. Anything in between, awful, terrible. Now, I think that if you're the Giants, you have to say that was Alex Smith's 2014 year, right? Where you go 9-7 or so, no wide receiver production really. And he still can kind of carry you around. The problem is to Jeff's point, Alex Smith never made more than 11% of the salary cap. And Daniel Jones here, depending upon kind of how you splice it, is going to make anywhere from 16 to 18. And that Jeff hit the nail on the head. Your idea of what wins football in the NFL, like, imagine thinking you can make anything close to what Mahomes makes when you're half the player. Like, I just don't get it.
Yeah. By the way, I do like this one. Can you really be called Danny Dimes when your contract's
That's like the Family Guy where Ted Turner drives up to a toll booth and they say that'll be a quarter, and he's like, "What's a quarter?"
Yeah. I heard Danny Dollars earlier today. I said Danny Dimes equals 160 million. That's a lot of dimes. I will tell you right now. It is amazing. I mean, they have $37 million worth of cap space before they do this deal. They're eating it all up, just giving it to him, or they're going to backload it. And if you backload that kind of money to a heavy extent, and then they're going to be in a cap hell with a solid, okay quarterback in just a couple of years. I said this, Brian Daboll is going to go from coach of the year to fired in 3 years. Yep. I mean, because they're not going to be able to put enough talent, to your point, Jeff, around Daniel Jones to make this work. You mentioned Geno Smith. Let's talk about him here. 3 years, $105 million, $35 million per. We talked about the quarterback middle class. Was it there? This is kind of on the bottom of that top end, but maybe if guys are going to push on up towards 50 and that kind of thing, are we starting to see a little bit of a middle class? It's overpaid, but not that far overpaid, Jeff.
I thought it was a really smart move by Geno Smith and the Seahawks to find something that was acceptable for him. I think he was making like $3 million last year. He had the year of his career year, and for him to recognize that he's in a good place with a good coaching staff, with DJ Metcalf, the Tyler Lockett, Kenneth Walker, solid offensive line. You got a lot of good things around you. And to be in that place as a 31-year-old quarterback after what he's been through, I give him a ton of credit for realizing that it's not about, okay, look, I can break the bank now and I can get my $40, $50 million. That he wants a chance to do something significant with his career. And I think there should be more quarterbacks who are in his sphere, like a Daniel Jones, who recognize that and are able to say, yeah, if I'm in a good spot and I can make this last for a while, it's good for me. Ryan Tannehill did the same thing in Tennessee. And I always say when people in Seattle ask me that on a radio show about what he should be paid, Geno should be paid. I said Ryan Tannehill money. And that's what he just got. He got a Ryan Tannehill level deal, $35 million. Most of the quarterbacks in this league who are starting, who aren't named Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow or Josh Allen or Justin Herbert, need to be in that space. And so hopefully Geno can set an example that other quarterbacks can follow, because those quarterbacks need players around them to keep winning.
Well, I could dislike the deal, Eric.
I don't dislike the deal. I think when it came out, it was kind of questionable, just sort of, because Geno kind of faded down the stretch last year. I mean, Jeff and my Detroit Lions almost made the playoffs by virtue of the fact that like the Seahawks didn't finish as well as they started. But this puts the Seahawks firmly in position to draft a quarterback at 5 if they want to, because they can move on from Smith after 1 year, even though they've given him, like, if the worst happens to Geno Smith, he gets a big payday, and he can go back to being a backup. If the best happens, that's where it gets a little dicey, because shorter term deals are rough if the guy plays to that level of performance. We've seen that with Cousins and Tannehill to an extent. So, but no, I think this is a fine deal for both sides. It does represent a little bit more of the middle class, quarterback deal, which I'm a fan of. So does Carr's to a certain extent as well. So yeah, I mean, I think there's upside there. I also think that they had a really good draft in 2022. If they have, again, an additional Russell Wilson pick here, they can continue to build. And I think Geno can be a part of that, as opposed to always being the front wind that's going against it, like Daniel Jones will be to the Giants.
Does he go back to the playoffs? Like how many more times, just let's get what your crystal ball say. How many more times does Geno Smith lead the Seahawks into the playoffs, Jeff?
In the 3-year deal he has in place, I think he'll get back there 2 more times. A young team, a lot of talent, high draft pick this year. They got a pretty good chance. I mean, I don't. It's hard to project what the Rams are going to be, but they're going to take a step back anyway because of salary cap issues. Arizona's not going to be a player. NFC South stinks.
Yeah, we don't know who the Niners quarterback is.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, so pretty good chance. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it does solidify where they're at. I want to get, because we've had a number of different questions before we get to Bryce Young and Jalen Carter, two guys that I think had significant developments, one off the field, one, I guess, technically off the field, at least his stature on the field. Just overall impressions. You guys were at the Combine last week. What was the biggest thing you brought away from the Combine, Eric?
That there is not as the quarterbacks don't stack as definitively as we think. Like I talked, and like, I'm going to be really honest. Like I came in with a loaded question. I like CJ Stroud the most out of the top 4. I think but my bar for what a good first round draft pick quarterback is a little bit lower. I think CJ Stroud's gonna be a very rich man's Mac Jones, which I think for a lot of teams that are picking in the top 10, right, that got other teams to trade them top 10 picks, I think that's a very good draft pick. I think Young is a little bit too slight to be, and we'll talk about this in a second, to be, but there's a lot of people that agree with me. There's a lot of people that have Stroud first, and a lot of people that are on teams that have Stroud first. And so I don't know if it's as definitive that Bryce Young's can go first. And Anthony Richardson is thought of very highly in the league by a lot of teams. And even though, he did have his struggles at Florida, there are teams that are willing to buy into that upside. I think the last one is that Will Levis is probably going to be a first round pick, but a lot of teams don't believe that. So I think that the quarterback, the stacking of the 4, which I think like the consensus is Young, Stroud, Richardson, Levis, is not as definitive across the league as you would think.
Well, and I think before the Combine, it was Levis and then Richardson. And Richardson was a maybe to be in the first round. And now it sounds like he's skyrocketing up towards the top 10. And Levis is maybe the guy in the backup. And everybody, Jeff, was celebrating Levis that he was going to go throw at the Combine, right? Yeah. That was supposed to be a big positive, that he wanted to show off his cannon, he said. What were your biggest takeaways from your time in Indianapolis?
It's probably time, as NFLPA chief DeMaurice Smith said, to rethink the value of this. I spent a lot of time talking to coaches and scouts. I was only there for a couple of days, but the overwhelming trend was, we're spending all day sitting around doing nothing. And then the nighttime comes, we do a couple things, we do it all over again. And it just feels as if you're seeing more teams who have decided it's not worth, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. The Rams don't go anymore. The Niners aren't there. The Jets only showed up because they wanted to talk to Derek Carr. And it feels like more teams are saying there's more efficient ways of doing this. Even the meetings, they talk about being able to do more stuff through Zoom now, getting the same impact out of it. In fact, there's a lot less. The Zoom option for teams meeting with players now is even more efficient because they don't spend a lot of time BSing at the beginning of the meeting. That's what I was told, that, for the first 15 minutes, for that 15-minute period, you get probably 5 spent just yucking it up. And so that you get right down to business sooner. And pro days mean everything now. I mean, most of these guys, as great as Anthony Richardson did at the combine, he could have put those same numbers up and probably will at Florida. He probably won't run the 40, but there's nothing happening there outside of interviews and medical stuff that means as much as it used to. It's just not the same event.
Jeff, there is not a time during the year that I spend more time watching your network than Combine, right?
Yeah.
Like, doesn't it have a practical? There are nerds like me. I mean, I'm sitting, I get my work done and doing whatever, and I'm kind of a late night owl. It was like 3:00 in the morning, and I was watching what's his name, the Georgia outside linebacker that clocked so fast.
Nolan Smith.
And I'm watching his interview and that conversation and everything. I'm just taking it all in. I mean, I got it on the whole combine. The NFL Network's on. I mean, can the league afford to give up what is kind of one of their tent poles of the offseason to keep people invested in the NFL? Like, maybe the teams don't love it so much, but the fans like it.
Yeah, it's a great TV show. I mean, that's what it's become now. But really, when you talk about the greatest highlights from it, like you said, aside from Richardson, aside from Nolan Smith, Michigan had a cornerback who ran a 4.26 40. I mean, really, it's maybe Richardson had a great vertical jump. There's not a lot of meat to it. And I think that's what's becoming more realistic. And most of these players who are really the high end guys know that they can go kill it at their pro day, which will, if you want to keep watching our network, you're going to see about 20 pro days over the next month from all over the country that will serve the same purpose and certainly have a bigger turnout and maybe a lot more compelling information coming out of those.
Yeah, I will be watching because I'm a nerd, and that's what I do. You mentioned the size of Bryce Young, Eric, 5'10", 204 pounds. He's about 10 pounds heavier than he was at Alabama, but people thought he was going to come in at about 6 foot. He's like, I think what was he officially 5'10" and a quarter? I think he came in at like exactly the same height as Russell Wilson. He doesn't carry the same kind of build that Russell Wilson did. How much does this harm his chances of being the number 1 overall pick?
Well, I think the fact that he, we're always going to sort of index on what we've seen most recently. Kyler Murray, people forget that was an offense that was the worst in the league by a country mile in 18. Murray gets it to like top 2/3 of the league, then top third of the league, then the playoffs. But the injuries the last 2 years have sullied, I think, some of his reputation. Young is not as good of a runner as Murray, so he doesn't add that. Russell Wilson is a shorter guy that has struggled in recent years. Breeze had to retire, Breeze retired. So
Breeze retired after 70,000 yards of passing.
Correct, but we're not watching him every freaking week and saying, oh, there's a short quarterback that's doing well.
That's a good point.
So I think that I do think there's some negativity on him. He's slender, kind of reminds me of like Jim McMahon type, where he's very effective, but got hit a lot. Right. So I mean, I'm a fan of his game. When I think about, injury, if you put him on a bad team that can't protect him, you're taking a big risk.
Baker Mayfield's been hurt a lot too. And it's not just the weight, the height does matter. I remember watching Brody Croyle, and shots that like 6'5.5" Tom Brady or 6'5.5" Peyton Manning, take, and then they kind of fold. They don't get pendulum down to where they're gaining momentum as they hit the ground. Shorter guys get taken up off their feet and driven into the ground. The taller guys, you're not getting that leverage point to where you can just whip them down. That's the part that's scary to me, Jeff, with the smaller quarterbacks. Because like I said, Brody Croyle was about 6'1", but I would have guessed him to be about 185 pounds. And they really did throw him around. And it wasn't just that he was small. It's that without that mass, he's easier to throw around. He's getting knocked down harder. I mean, that is the scary thing. If you take the guy, you love the arm, you love the way he throws the ball, but how many games do you think you're going to get out of him?
Yeah. And really, Eric hit the nail on the head. You look at every other quarterback who is comparable to him in size and stature. Most of these guys, one, get dinged up, and two, if they're not dynamic runners, there really is a problem. To me, this is a lot like Tua's issue in Miami, where it's just if you're somebody who's going to survive off savvy and accuracy and arm talent, like, you better be really good at avoiding getting hit. And that's just if you can't do that, you're going to get hurt. Russell Wilson has had a good career because he can move around. Kyler Murray has been a dynamic player, even though he's been banged up lately, because he can move around. Drew Brees is the outlier here, but are you going to bet on one out of every 20 guys who come down the pipe at this size working out? That's not a great ratio. But
I know
it
it's
does
ugly.
speak. What's
It's
that?
ugly with Wilson now, but we gotta throw Russell Wilson in there as a success story. Back to back Super
Oh
Bowl.
yeah, but I'm saying because he can
Brees,
move
by
around.
the way,
Part of
though,
that was the improvisation.
Yeah.
And Brees was not. I mean, Brees sat for a year behind Flutie. He got benched for Doug Flutie once he got in. I mean, Brees lost his job, was supposed to lose his job to Phillip Rivers. Like, that was not as easy of an acclimation, or to the NFL as we'd like to think as well. So it's just hard. And Russell Wilson's a tank, right? Like, that's the other part of Wilson being short, is like the guy's a moose back there too. So like the being small and being short and slender is a really tough thing to have to overcome if you're a quarterback.
Yeah. Where do you think he goes? What's your gut tell you?
I think he goes first overall. I think it's a trade. Panthers could be that team. I think that I've always said the Panthers have Brian Burns, that they could help trade to the Bears, because I think the Bears need to use that $100 million of cap space on things other than players like Orlando Brown, and so could be one. Colts and Texans are the obvious choices as well. Raiders as well. Like, I think he could go to any one of them. But I do think he goes first overall. I just don't think it's a slam dunk the way that many people believe.
Jeff, where do you think he goes?
Yeah, he goes first overall. I mean, all those teams Eric mentioned make sense. Certainly, if Houston could offer Larry Tunsil, that's an interesting proposition as a trade.
Mm-hmm.
As a trade option as well. But
you've got a quarterback we're worried about getting hurt. What we're going to do to get him is trade the guy who protects him.
Exactly.
Well,
the thing about Bryce Young that people, all my guys, Daniel Jeremiah, Bucky Brooks, all these guys do the evaluations. The people you talk to, and everything else about him is great. It's like that, and that's really the conundrum here, is that the height and the weight are so critical to success in the NFL that when you have a guy who, if he was anybody else, if he was half the passer, we wouldn't even have this conversation. If he was, half the brain power, we would have this conversation. He is so good at so many other things that he's making these measurables something people are trying to get their head around. But again, I wouldn't want to be making that pick. I would rather have CJ Stroud and know that he ain't the biggest guy in the world either, but he's 6'3", legit. Right. And so at least he's got some height to go with him.
Yeah.
You'd rather let somebody else take the risk on Bryce Young, and you get CJ Stroud as a more, like I said, like a rich man's Mac Jones. I think is what Stroud represents, is kind of a high floor guy, but with a higher ceiling certainly than that guy. That's a better risk profile in my opinion. But
all right, how about Jalen Carter? I think the part that's going on here that people are saying, well, it's a misdemeanor charge. He was arrested and charged with two of them for his connection in two people being killed in a racing situation. How much will this impact his draft status, Jeff? How much should it impact his draft status?
It depends on what comes out of it. The vibe I was getting was that it wasn't as I don't want to minimize two people dying in the drag racing situation. So I'm trying to phrase this correctly, but I think the feeling was that he didn't play a direct role in this. Some people were questioning, did he lie to the cops? Like the way the news came out at the timing of it seemed to suggest that people knew about, from what I'm told, people knew about this 2 or 3 weeks ago that it was coming. And so for him to be embarrassed, to have to pack up his stuff in Indy, trot back to Georgia, go through this, you want to take it seriously. But I think there's also the feeling that, because it's a misdemeanor, it's not as much of a poisonous situation for him as far as his draft status. Like he wasn't going to be the first pick anyway, just because someone's going to trade up and get a quarterback. The question is where he lands. And if he's going to be below the top 5, I think people just kind of forget about this kind of stuff.
Jeff, I can't get my arms around exactly. Did he lie? Has he changed his story?
Yeah.
Do we really know what exactly his role was in the situation? And how many other red flags are there around him that this is like, okay, this is the final straw? I heard some people I thought was a good point. It's like, listen, it's not about the actual, charge that's against him. It's the fact that, why is his story changing all the time? Can you rely on him? Can you count on him? That kind of thing was where, they felt like it was drawing into question with him. I mean, do we still to this point know exactly what happened?
We don't, and I don't know if we ever will, because he's the only one who's there who's alive. So all you have is his perspective on all this. And again, I'm not going to sit here and again make light of it, because it is a serious thing. We saw what happened with Henry Ruggs with Vegas, drag racing. What can happen? Not just your life, but someone else's life can be taken who's not involved in any of this kind of stuff. And I don't know all the details of it. I just think it's hard to kind of sit here and try to figure out how to find fault with the guy who's driving his own car when 2 other people are driving their own cars and die. And so I think that's probably where the murkiness comes, is how much can he be involved in their deaths when their own actions are, leading to their deaths.
Eric, what do you think this does to Carter's status?
Yeah, I think he falls a little bit, but not much. I mean, Jeff could probably speak to this more than me, but like, I think the average person would be really surprised the kind of stuff that the average NFL player is getting involved in recreationally, right? And there's the alcohol being involved was bad, right? Like that, to me, I think that's what, there's a different, again, Jeff said it really well. Like you don't want to diminish these things, but like, there's one thing to be like drag racing. There's one thing to be like 3 times the legal limit drag racing. So I think that there's a judgment issue there, but I don't think it's going to drop him much. He's not going to pick 15. I'll just say that. Like, I think it's going to be a minimal drop. And yeah, it's unfortunate that 2 people lost their lives. I do think like I said, I think a lot of people are shocked by what happens, but if we pulled back the curtain and saw what NFL players and folks are doing on the regular, I think it would be thought of as an unlucky incident.
Young people make mistakes. How old people make mistakes? Young people make more of them because they don't have the experience of having made those mistakes earlier in life that older people have. But I think this is what to me is amazing is it's all about draft and his draft spot, what it's going to do, and him. I think the bigger part of this and I'm surprised it's not getting more reporting, although I did, Kirby Smart was sat down. I don't think it was on your network, Jeff. I think it was on ESPN. Somebody had Kirby Smart. I don't know what was going on that they had the chance. They said, do you have a problem? Do you have a culture problem at Georgia? And he said, no, we don't. I don't know that it's a Georgia thing as much as when you've got support staff that are in and around and, like I said, young people are going to make mistakes and tragically sometimes that involves people's lives. But the young lady that was killed, I think it was like a recruiting. I don't know what her job title was, but if alcohol's involved in that, like, what is the culture of the recruiting process and everything that's going on. I think it's a bigger question for college football, for Georgia, for the SEC, than it is necessarily for the NFL draft and Jalen Carter alone.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there is an element, and I'm not going to sit here and get on a soapbox and try to, get too intense about this. But there is certainly a different culture in college sports, and I think part of it's NIL, part of it's the celebrity that comes with it, and the same things happen in Alabama with their basketball program, with the Brandon Miller, the shooting down there. I think a lot people would be stunned to see how a lot of these kids are living in some of these small towns where they are gods, and there's not a lot of consequence to what they do, and so Eric said it right. I think people would be surprised to know what happens in these places, not just professionally now, but in college towns, because you're just, you can walk around and do whatever you want, and sometimes you have to understand boundaries.
Yeah.
And this kind of thing speaks to that. Like, even the coach not being able to speak to it is just like, yeah, dude, 2 people died in your program. It's a problem.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. All right. Don't forget our sponsor, Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Any kind of parking issues you have, they're Kansas City's best, making parking lot problems disappear since 1994. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the KC metro area. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crew. Every project comes with a written warranty, and they're hiring as well right now for all positions, as you can find them online right now at GannAsphalt.com. That's GannAsphalt.com. So, for Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Eric Eager from Sumer Sports, brand new website, sumersports.com. Make sure you check it out. All the podcasts that Eric's involved in. He wants you to know, listen to them all, mandatory listening with Eric Eager. My name is Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB, saying thank you very much for joining us here on the 2 Deep NFL Podcast.